spooky world of MultimediaJay.
If I had to pick one annoying thing about this winter, I would definitely bring up that these regular mild spells pretty much kill my ability to get used to the cold. We're back to winter again after 2 days of 50-something degrees, so once again using the robe as a snuggie, even though I have the heater and the down fan going to try and circulate the heat a little better. I've been shutting it off to record these little videos with, but I shouldn't sacrifice the even heating of the house in order to do that sort of thing. Today the putty knife earns its keep, or it helps destroy this thing. This is the SanDisk Sansa clip that I picked up to listen to music with not too long ago, actually. Actually, there was a WWMJ from when I first got this thing. This thing's predecessor lasted me over 10 years, and it was on battery number 2 when I finally retired it. This thing, the battery went dead after less than a year. Now, that's a problem, because back when I was first considering what MP3 player to get, I had heard that iPod batteries at the time could go dead in less than a year, and then Apple would charge people a full repair fee in order to fix. That's one of the reasons why I went with SanDisk in the first place. Now, I don't see any screws or anything to unhook on here, so what I'm going to do is try putting the putty knife to the edge of this and see if I can get the front to come off. I want to see if the battery's disconnected inside or if it just sucks that much. Nope, we are done. This plastic piece broke because it's thin plastic, and I just pried this apart, and I think I've already had enough of this. I'm sure I could pry apart the rest of it too, but obviously it's not going to be the same. It's not meant to actually be serviceable. Yet another throwaway piece of plastic crap. Now, when you consider the SanDisk E-Series that I had before it, the Sansa E-Series, had screws in the back that would take the back plate off, exposing the battery so you could swap the battery, and that's one of the big reasons why I picked this thing's predecessor up in the first place. To have this thing be like this is just disgusting. It makes me want to go search for a second-hand E-Series instead of getting another one of these. So yes, made to be broken. You can't really service it unless you really know what you're doing or have service literature. And this is why right to repair is such a hot issue among electronics folks, because if I could have found some literature on this, maybe this would have turned out better. But after less than a year, this thing is useless, and it will be thrown into the great sift bin, which, oh, handy that, it's right there. Well, it looks like all that Crystal Pepsi earlier didn't really do anything in terms of me staying up later. You can feel the sugar crash and the caffeine crash coming on, or as the old 5-hour energy commercials will say, the 2:30 feeling, even though it's definitely evening and whatnot. I'm so hardwired to get up earlier than I have been. Ooh, boob light reflection. So here's what's left of the crap top, and here is where the focus of our efforts is going to be. Oh, look, there we go. Oh, boot device not found. Interesting. I think I might have taken the SSD out of this thing. But, oh, there goes the screen again. Now you see what we're doing here. Yeah. This is where the rest of the focus is going to be, because I want this thing to either work again or be dismantled this weekend. I know the external D-sub jack works. But, as you can see, the panel has the infamous compact white screen of death these days. Now, if you can imagine back when this was still my main laptop in the bedroom TV setup, so to speak, where I was trying to watch YouTube on it and stuff like that, me constantly closing and reopening that thing or slapping the back of the screen thinking the screen was loose or something. It's kind of like, my dad told me about old TVs where you had to, slap the side of them a couple of times to get a good picture. But this is the computer equivalent of it. Now, I don't know. I was hoping that I could get an SSD out of this, but shoot, do I not have an SSD in it anymore? Anyways, maybe I'm getting my computers mixed up. I was hoping to take the SSD out of this and put it in the 2005 system instead, if this thing wasn't worth saving. But it is an Athlon 2 system. It's got a little bit of punch, and it still scores higher in terms of processing power than the netbook, even though it has a built-in Radeon and not anything resembling an APU. It'd be interesting if I could get this working again if it did turn out to be a loose cable or connection that needed to be alcoholed, but this will be what we look at this weekend. I was just checking this out today to see what the current operating the current operating status of this thing is, aka not at all. So, the compact white screen of death. Hey, how you doing, folks? Let's point this back up. There's also a bit of a problem with glare into the camera and whatnot, and no flicker vision on a little panel like that. But you see, there it goes. It gets all milked up, and that's that. So, but at least the screen's not flappy like on the Turd Shiba. Okay, this will be our weekend project. Time to get some shut-eye, as I'm so pathetically hardwired for a day shift schedule that even with caffeine I'm not staying up late anymore. Nope, the SSD is already out. Duh.
Epic fail.
One last note before we call it a night. Don't weep for this MP3 player. It is a massive downgrade in terms of build quality. Not only did the battery actually go dead on me, but I've seen a teardown guide of this thing. The battery is soldered on, as opposed to the removable, replaceable one that was a selling point of the old E-series back when the iPods were going dead in under a year and then Apple was charging full repair fees. And just like that, it's day 3, not day 2. Day 2 was completely consumed by Saturday always being traditionally a day of rest and relaxation, plus the announcement of that Pentium that's really going to shake things up, and the Patriots crushing the Texans in football yesterday evening. So, let's try this again now, shall we? And just like that, it's the afternoon on day 3, whatever. And here we are with, well, get the laundry over with while we're messing around with more stuff, but we destroyed the Downy ball somehow. I have no idea how this got knocked around this much, but it's out of commission, so I'm gonna stay one ahead on these things and buy 2 of them. Use one of them until it breaks, and now it just fell behind everything. Use one of them until it breaks, and then buy the next one's replacement, and so on and so forth. Now I gotta apply the fabric softener the hard way. Wait until I hear the rinse cycle start, and then dump the darn stuff in. Whatever. We're in all the way down to the motherboard level, and if I took off the wireless radio, the whole Mobo could just come out entirely. But I once again have found sadly a familiar old pet peeve of mine here, and that is, I am known, infamous actually, at the 9 to 5 for being an absolute hater of situations where special snowflakes who think they know what they're doing wire something up, put everything completely straight and taut with zero room for slack whatsoever, and then some genius finds a way to break everything because there's no slack, no room, nothing, so they find a way to pull, yank, sever, wires, the works. So I have this thing down to just the motherboard. Even the power switch is just a bare board at this point. But if we turn this on now, and we watch the screen over here, perfect. It screws up. The BIOS completely screws up. Now, we can wiggle some of these wires and actually get this thing to screw up. And we can wiggle some of these wires and actually get this thing to screw up. Now, I could disassemble the screen entirely, and I could try and see where the cable goes inside the screen and see if that's loose. But I found out, you know, this was being pulled very, very tightly, and it was being yanked and pulled in the whole 9 yards. Now, if I pull this thing completely out, of course the screen dies. If I plug in one side but not the other, it blacks out. And if I plug in one side but not the other, the other side but not the other, it whites out. And then if I do this, everything starts working again. So basically what I want to do before reassembling this thing is alcohol up the contacts and then reassemble this thing enough to see if using the hinges screws with things any. I have a teardown guide on inside my laptop ready to go. Might be a good idea also to spray this thing out too for the processor. When do I ever get to blast some air on this side of the fan? But yeah, that's it. So this thing, I don't know what end it's on, but I was able to wiggle this earlier and get this to screw up, but I think it might have just been the plug. Because if I unplug it, if I unplug it and then plug in the far half but not the near half, blackout. Near half but not the far half, whiteout. Everything, boom, look, a picture. So that's what it was coming from. I basically have to rig this up so that there's actually room for some slack here, so the screen can bend back and forth without yanking or pulling the wires. We're done. Did I ever mention how much I hate laptops? Well, if I haven't, or you weren't around to hear me say this earlier, I hate laptops. They have all these little proprietary gotchas in them. Little gotchas that ultimately, well, get ya. See that? That's what it looks like when a computer flips you off. That's a single finger salute from this machine. That's one of those teeny tiny ribbon cables that used to go to the power switch, whose board is right over there. I was careful because these were little tiny ribbon cables, but that didn't make a difference. Ultimately, these little tiny cables inside these devices, they're like asbestos. You can be careful all the heck, but your troubles begin the minute you disturb them. So, I about had it with this thing. Now, the interesting part about all of this is that I can still get new power boards for this thing. I could still buy a new power button board that would come with the ribbon cable pre-attached and plug it in to the board and get this thing working again. But those things cost about $10 to $30 depending on whether I want to buy from some yuck on eBay or an actual laptop parts depot. And even then, I wouldn't know if the screen was working the way it was supposed to now, even though I did plug and unplug or replug that cable. So, and even if I had everything in working order, what would I be bringing back? I would be bringing back one of the worst portables that I have, and one of the least efficient portables that I have. The battery is completely dead because it's too darn old. The thing was an Athlon dual-core, old-school dual-core with only 2 actual, threads. Old-school dual-core. This thing had 3 gigs of RAM, and back when I got this thing, I thought that was a lot. There was one point when this thing had more RAM than my main system running Windows, and it ran Windows 7 while my main system was still running XP. So, this thing has been through a lot, and it's also caused a lot of headaches along the way. You consider the portable before it, the original silver platter Acer something or another, Travelmate, that's what it was. The original Acer before this, the single core, it completely went dead on me because I left it irresponsibly in a room with no heat during one of these cold New England winters. The one after this, of course, is the netbook, which is a lot more solidly built and hasn't given me any problems like this. It just works, even though it was supposed to be a piece of crap from Acer. If you're wondering what that worm thing is reflecting from the ceiling, that's the shadow of the hook that I could hang a plant off of if I had one here, just to get that out of the way. So anyways, I could theoretically get this whole thing working again, but for what? But for what exactly? I'll have spent that money, and it would have been better off if that money went towards something a little more interesting, that especially when I'm looking to get rid of, or especially when I'm looking for the Ryzen APU to power my next laptop. I've also seen the laptop that I use for work, which is built a lot better, on sale, refurbished for under $200 for an Ivy Bridge. This Athlon 2 couldn't hold a candle to it. So I could theoretically get a new power board, but I wouldn't know if the screen was working properly. And even if the screen was working properly, it's just not worth it at this point. So, aside from perhaps finding some new life for the RAM or some other parts, it's time for this thing to be added to the collection for the next great SIFT trip. It had a good run, but this thing was clearance even when I bought it in August of 2010. The crap top is now finally crap. It had the build quality of a children's toy, and ultimately it was just as flaky as if it might as well have been a children's toy. In terms of salvageable parts, this thing was already on Blu-ray drive number 2, or excuse me, optical drive number 2. This used to be a Blu-ray Samsung, I think. Was this from my Samsung when the blue laser died? I don't know. Anyways, that was a Blu-ray drive at one point. I think it was what came out of the Samsung that I tried all those years ago. And the blue laser died, but the red laser still works. So this thing is essentially a DVD drive that's available if, say, a portable needs it. And of course we have the RAM as well. Wonder if the RAM would give the netbook a little bit of a boost. Well, the good news is that these do share the same generation of RAM. The bad news is that there's only one RAM socket on this darn thing. The other one just plain was never installed. I hate laptops. You still work perfectly. Why do you have to be the one that works perfectly after nearly 5 years? Yep, as of March, this piece of junk will be 5 years old. Maybe it'll be off of 100% CPU by then from downloading a bazillion updates. Well, it's quite alright, because if this thing had a mechanical hard drive in it, it'd be at 100% disk. I'm starting to wonder if that's such a bad thing now. AMD C60 APU, that piece of junk scored better on Nova Bench than this thing did. Ay, 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 whatever am I gonna do with this thing? I bought it as a birthday present for myself when I turned 30, and now here we are, heading towards 5 years later. Yeah, right. But this one doesn't give me, the white screen of death, or perfectly stretched taut wires that mess things up when, the screen gets bent too many times. Nope, capped out. The 8 gigs of RAM in the turd Shiba consists of 2 sticks and 2 slots, which is interesting because the official write-up for it says that the RAM in this thing is not user upgradable, which is obviously wrong. It's not soldered on or anything, but you do have to take the entire bottom of the laptop off in order to get at stuff, though. So then there's this stupid thing for the SSD. Turd Shiba. Let's put it back together before it self-destructs. But anyways, yeah, DDR3L versus DDR3. Nope, no go. We'll just save the RAM sticks in case we find something else that takes them. Turd Shiba's back up and running. That thing's good to go. That thing's good to go, just needs some storage. And, well, yeah, the other thing? Right. The latest Great Sift contribution. Well, I guess this answers all my remaining questions about that laptop. One less computer to worry about. Actually, one less computer, period. Well, let's call it here. So, where do we go from here, I wonder? We're short one SSD in order to, I'll put Windows 2000 on an SD card. No. That's been done before, hasn't it? No, yeah, we'll pick this, we'll figure out where we're going from here later on. But for now, though, I think I've been spending way too much time making content, not enough time enjoying content. Plus, football scores. Those are super important. Let's see how the football games are going. This is MultimediaJay, signing off. Thanks for stopping by.